Good morning, everyone. My name is Kathy Whitaker, and I'm the director of the First Tennessee Area Agency on Aging and Disability. And I would like to welcome you to our virtual education series, which is I thought I was a people person until I started working with people. And this is part 2. And I think a lot of you all joined us in April for part 1, and we're all so excited to hear part 2. I would like to thank Visiting Angels as our sponsor. And we have with us today Kim Howell, who is our marketing liaison with Visiting Angels, who's going to make a few remarks. Kim? There's Kim. And we can't hear you.
There, now can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Hi, I'm Kim Howell with Visiting Angels in Home Care, and we are very honored to sponsor this series. We were really blessed to sponsor the first part of Lisa's presentation, and so we're very excited about hearing the second part. Visiting Angels is an in-home care, non-medical, serving the Tri-Cities. We are there to help and hope that we can help seniors age in place at home or wherever home may be. We are there to offer all of the activities of daily living. So we are very, very honored again to sponsor this series, and we look forward to hearing the presentation. Thank you all.
Thank you, Kim. I would like to say that we have 80 individuals who have registered today, and we have people registering for our seminar from all across the state. Many of the area agencies on aging in Memphis and Jackson and Martin and Chattanooga and Nashville and Cookeville, Knoxville, all over the state. Our area agencies on aging are participating, as well as many other agencies. So really appreciate all of their involvement into our seminar. So now I'd like to introduce again to you Lisa Smartt. And Lisa loves to make people laugh. And she lives on a 16 wooded acre on the outskirts of Dresden, Tennessee, with her more than wonderful husband of 26 years. She has 2 teenage sons, and she tells us that they often fight, and a misguided cat named Hobo. She travels nationally as a motivational humorous and writes a weekly newspaper column called the Smartt View. Her future aspirations include organizing her purse, and I'm wondering if you've done that yet, Lisa, because I said you were going to do that back in April. Eating more green. Oh, okay. Eating more green leafy vegetables, and also cleaning out her hall closet. And so I'm wondering if Lisa has done any of that. But anyway, I really enjoyed Lisa's presentation back in April. I can't imagine how difficult it is to talk in a Zoom camera when I know Lisa gets so much feedback from the audience, but she was fantastic in April, and I'm looking so forward to hearing from you again today, Lisa. So, Lisa, you're on.
Thank you very much. Welcome. Love, can you get me on a big screen here? I'm sorry. I have no tech ability. Like, think of the 100-year-old person you know that has no tech ability. I have less tech ability than they do. Thank you very much. My husband is helping me here at the University of Tennessee at Martin. And I want to welcome you. Hello, happy Tuesday. Everybody grab your Vienna sausages or whatever you're eating, being as you're in online mode, so we don't have the same social graces that we have to have when we're actually at a conference. So you can either get some Viennas. Now, some of y'all were not raised on Vienna sausages because you came from people that were more health conscious than that. I want y'all to know, for those of you that were raised on, and you know how you say it, Vienna, not Vienna, you say Vienna sausages. For those of you raised on that, I want y'all to know a little story that I had not planned on telling. My daddy ate Vienna sausages nearly every Sunday night of his life. He was 86 and in perfect health. He did not die from health reasons. He actually was killed in a car wreck. He probably would have lived to be 100. So don't diss on the Vienna sausages. That's see, if you learn nothing else today in this conference, you learned that. So grab your Vienna sausages. We're getting ready to get started. We're going to go full bore. Kathy was right. I don't like online presentations. Who would? If you like to be with people, you certainly don't want to be in an office making an online presentation. But this is what we have, and we're not going to whine about it. We're not going to complain. And so I'm excited to be with you, even though I'm not with you. And hopefully soon that'll change and we'll all be able to get together more. We're going to do a quick overview of what we did last time. For those of you that weren't a part of the last one, I'm just going to do, it says webcam closed by organizer. The organizer has stopped sharing your webcam. Huh.
Hang on, let's try this. Let's turn it back on.
Okay.
There you go.
Hey, I'm back. We had technical difficulties. Am I back on? I'm sure they would tell me if I wasn't back on.
Now they're talking, but apparently.
Yes, you're on and it's working.
Okay. Thank you so much to all the tech people who know what's going on. I'm so glad somebody does, because I do not. We're going to do a quick overview of what we did last time, just real fast to kind of remind you of where we are on this. I thought I was a people person until I started working with people. All of us can relate to that, because even though we love people, they're also the very situation that makes it so hard to do our jobs or to work in our families or to be involved in life. People are the greatest blessing and the greatest difficulty at the same time. So we're going to go over the other principles that we did real quickly. One was, if you think you're better than others, that's a sure sign you're not. So the first motto of the people business is not to walk with haughtiness, because it won't work. People won't respect you. They won't love you. So if you think you're better than others, that's a sure sign you're not. There's funny stories that go with that, but I don't have time today to tell that one. Number two was, we need other people, even the ones that aggravate the FAR, F-A-R, out of us. Some people, if you're real outgoing and somebody else is real quiet, or they're real type A and you're real type Z, and you have a little conflict at work, but those are the people you need because they have the opposite gifts you have. So we talked about that. Number three, we talked about stop replaying the things in your mind, things that people have said about you that either aren't true or weren't edifying or encouraging. And we have to sometimes stop that before we let it keep playing all the way through on repeat. You know, the thing of you're not so smart, or you people don't like, you know, things that we push play and we play on repeat. Sometimes something that happened in 8th grade, we've got to stop that. Number four, assume the best when people communicate with you. We talked a little bit about that, because some people can't work with other people because they get their feelings hurt so easy. Every time somebody says one little something, they get their feelings hurt. It's hard to work with that person. You're going to have a better work experience if you can just get to where, like, if somebody says something that's slighting to you, you just assume they're having a bad day. You're just letting it go, unless it's something big. Okay, number five was, all your effort may lead to a less than ideal result, but use the effort anyway. The difference between the people business, which I know all of y'all are in the people business, the difference between the people business and, let's say, a different field where it's more technical or just fixing things, in the people business, no matter how hard you work or how well you work, at the end of the day, it looks messy and undone, and it looks like failure, because when you're working with people, it's not like a robot where they just produce something and it comes out exactly right, right? No matter what you do with people, sometimes at the end of it, it looks like it's been a failure. And I just want to encourage you on this Tuesday morning. I want to encourage you, even though it looks like a failure at the end of the day, you keep on pressing on, because that's what the people business is. It's not like going to be debits and credits where at the end we're going to see how all the result came out perfect. It's at the end, it's going to still look undone. And that's the people business. So hang in there. That's number 5. Now, tonight, I feel like y'all should be bringing me some kind of a rubbery chicken dinner because we're evidently at night. No, we're not. And I don't even have a sausage biscuit, and I'm a little torn up about that, but I'm fat and I don't need to eat sausage biscuits. So I'm feeling kind of happy about it at the same time. Conflicted would be the word. Okay, number 6 is where we're going to start today. And that is, most people will disappoint you, help them anyway. We're going to talk about that a little later on. Most people will disappoint you, help them anyway. And I know a lot of y'all have lived your whole career and your whole life like that. You know exactly what I mean by that. You're not always going to get a thank you note. You're not always going to get a wow, I appreciate that. In fact, maybe most of the time, you're going to get negative criticism. Have y'all ever helped somebody so much? I mean, you poured your life out to help this client or this person. I mean, you gave it all, 110%. And then at the end, as you were leaving or you were leaving this interaction, you thought they're going to say, wow, thanks so much. And as you're leaving, they're like, wait, you didn't do this one thing, you know. Help them anyway, because you're, as my mama would say, you're grown and you're from a different stock. And what she meant by that was you've got to be bigger than people who are petty. And so I want to encourage you, because I know a lot of y'all have poured out your life for people that have not always been appreciative for it. So number 6, most people will disappoint you, help them anyway. I want to tell you a little story about that. It's a little personal story. We live out in the country. You know, if we were with an audience, I would say, how many of y'all live out in the county, as my granny would say? You know, there's city dwellers, and then there's people who live out from. It's really funny because we live out from a town that's really small anyway. So most people would think that's pretty rural living, but we don't even live in the town. We live out from Dresden. And we live out in the country. And if you know anything about country roads in the state of Tennessee, they are narrow, aren't they? When we moved here from Texas, I've never seen anything like this. There's no shoulder. Like out where we live, you can't have a flat tire or need to do anything. I mean, it's just a narrow country road. You have to be a good driver. And evidently I'm not a good driver, because one day out between Dresden and Palmersville, now some of y'all have no idea where I'm talking about, but out between Dresden and Palmersville, there's a little highway about 9 inches wide. And I was driving on that highway years ago. And I remember feeling like, well, first of all, I'm going to tell you what I was driving, because that makes a big part of the story. Phil and I, we were Dave Ramsey before Dave Ramsey was cool. You know what I'm saying? So I was driving a 96, was it a 96?
It was.
Yeah, 96 Crown Victoria. How many of y'all had a Meemaw that had that Crown Victoria? And you know, that's why the Meemaws all had that huge monstrosity of a car, because your Meemaw would say, I can pick up 18 kids for Bible school because I've got the Crown Vic. You know, that is a monstrosity of a vehicle. But I was driving this 96 Crown Vic down this little narrow country road. And I know y'all wanting to know, yes, red velour interior. I know, you can just see it. You old people can see it. Now, you young whippersnappers, you don't know what it looks like. Don't get on your phone and look at a 96 Crown Vic right now, but later on, check it out, because it was a bus. So I'm driving down the road on this little narrow country road, and I feel like I'm getting over to the right. And so I do what I had heard my whole life, and now I've experienced it in real life. I evidently overcorrected. I thought I was getting back on the road, and evidently I overcorrected, slung across that highway into a grove of trees, as I told the sheriff's department later, at a very moderate rate of speed, probably more like 70. And I hurled into those trees, and it was a terrible wreck. That Crown Vic was smushed up onto my right leg. I mean, it was just like that Crown Vic was on my leg. Our son at the time was about 12, and he was behind me, And he said, Mama, can you get out of the car? I said, no, I can't get out of the car. This car is on me. And he was bleeding from the head. And he said, Mom, I'll go up to the road and get help. I'll go up. Now, the great thing about being between Dresden and Palmersville is if you know anything about rural people, there's no way somebody's going to pass a bleeding kid on the road and say, I don't know, Henry. He looks like he might rob us. I mean, he weighed like 65 pounds, you know. So he went up to the road. But while he was up on the road, I had a realization with this Crown Vic on top of my lap. And I know what some of y'all are thinking. You're like, girl, you realize you hadn't shaved your legs. You're getting ready to go to the hospital and you hadn't shaved your legs. No, that was not the realization. Some of y'all are like, I know what it is. You hadn't listened to your granny and you had on raggedy underwear, and that was the problem. No, that wasn't the problem. If you've got a big Crown Vic on your lap out in the woods in Palmersville, there's a bigger problem than not having shaved your legs or having on raggedy underwear. No underwear at all. If I'm lying, I'm dying. Kill me right now. Big girl got a Crown Vic on her lap wearing no underwear. Now, I had seen enough of ER to know how they sometimes have to extricate you from the vehicle. They remove your items of clothing. And by this time, people were gathering because there's nothing to do in Palmersville except see the EMTs try to get that big girl out of a Crown Vic. I mean, they were having a prayer circle within 30 minutes. And so my little son came back and he said, Mama, everybody's stopping. And I said, no, tell them to go away. Because I knew that old man in overalls, his heart wasn't going to be able to take it if things went the way I thought they might go when the EMTs got there. So I began to pray and I said, God, either kill me or keep these stretch pants on. Now, some of you type A people are like, I'm not even going to listen to what this big girl says because I want to know why she wasn't wearing her underwear out there in Palmersville. Well, honestly, it's none of your business, but I'm not afraid to tell you because I'm an open book. I don't mind to tell you the truth. A few weeks before then, I had had a girl surgery. That's what we call it in the country. Like on Wednesday night prayer meeting, they say, y'all pray for Jolene. She's having girl surgery. What they mean is they're going to do something down in that area. They're going to take something out or put something in. We're not asking any questions. Well, I had a big mass. It was not malignant. It was just a benign mass, but they had to do a big surgery, make a big cut and get that mass out. And so a few weeks earlier, me being a very intelligent person or pretty average intelligence, I figured out that big scar would heal better if I had a little more air movement down there. Y'all know what I'm saying, you know? And so I went to the Family Dollar, got some stretch pants in a bigger size, and just let that big scar heal. So see, I was doing something medically suave whenever I got in this car wreck. But so I remember thinking, you know, but a few days earlier before this car wreck, I had said, you need to get your underwear back on, because I was finding myself getting proud and haughty. Like I'd see you at the grocery store and I'd be in my stretch pants and I'd be thinking, I ain't got on panties, you know, like I began to get proud and haughty about it. And so I realized like I need to get my underwear back on, but I thought I'll take a few more days, you know. Well, then here I am up against this tree with this Crown Vic on my lap. And I know some of y'all right now are like, I'm getting actual credit for this. This story better end with a big moral. Don't worry. It's going to end with a good moral. Country people have to tell the story, and sometimes it takes a minute to get the story told. Okay. So, oops, I just hit something. So sure enough, a bunch of people from Palmersville came out there to watch them get me out of that car. And the EMTs, God bless, I'm telling you, hooray for all the EMTs, because they actually spared my life. I mean, they saved my life. And I remember thinking, please don't have to take these pants off, but they didn't, y'all. They actually got me out of that Crown Vic. They pulled me out. Now, they did hurt me, boy. My leg was crushed in 1,000 pieces. And the guy said, when we're getting ready to pull you out, you're going to scream. And me being from a good family and everything, I said, oh, no, I'm not going to scream. I'm very appreciative. And he said, oh, no, you're going to scream. And so sure enough, they pulled out. You know, I was screaming, because when your femur is crushed in 1,000 pieces and they pull you out of the car, you're going to scream. But anyway, they got me out of the car and everybody was clapping and I was thankful. I knew I was going to be okay. I was going to have a long recovery, My son was all bandaged up. The EMTs had taken care of him. We were going to be fine. He got me into the ambulance. And at that point, he got out a pair of scissors and he said, "Miss Smartt, I hope these pants aren't important to you." And I said, "You have no idea. My great grandmother brought these over on the boat on a big Viking ship hundreds of years ago. And I was told never to tear." No, I knew he was looking and thinking they looked like they came from the sale rack at the Family Dollar. So I made him raise his right hand and promise to never tell what was told there. And as I think all EMTs have that natural ability to not tell what they see. And the good news to this story is everybody turned out fine. And you're wondering, what's the moral to that story? Other than the fact that Lisa can't drive and she didn't have on her underwear and she's scarred. Well, the moral to that story is there's a little young EMT in Weakley County who will never marry. No, I'm just joking. That's not the moral of the story. That's not the moral of the story. I want you to hear clearly. It does have a moral and it does involve what we're talking about today. The moral to that story is that when those EMTs arrived, I was in an absolute crisis situation. And they never one time said, "Miss Smartt, have you been drinking? Or is that the reason you ran off the road?" They never one time said, "Miss Smartt, did somebody run you off the road? Or was this your fault? Or was this somebody else's fault?" Because hear me clearly, I was in that crisis situation 100% because of something I did. Now, it might have been an accident. I didn't do it on purpose. But nobody ran me off the road. Nobody misguided me. I mean, I'm the one who did it. I was responsible. And yes, I had not been drinking or doing anything like that. But even that, I was irresponsible. I was the one. It was on me. But their job that day was not to try to identify who was the person at fault. Their job that day was to look at a person in crisis and solve and help and be a rescuer. Every single day, you're involved with people who have self-imposed crises. Amen. Some of your coworkers, some of the people you deal with, some of your clients, some people in your family. And you're going to be tempted sometimes to be hypercritical rather than realize, hey, if you have the means, the blessing is to be able to help the person, even though it's their fault that they're there. Had they been a fault finder, they would have said, "Well, look, if you can't drive and you can't even keep your car on the road, we're just going to leave you here." And had they left me, I would have perished. They were there to provide support and help in a time of crisis. And that's what every single one of us get up every morning to do, to provide support. That doesn't mean there's not times we have to cut people off because we love them and we want to make good boundaries. I'm not talking about not making good boundaries. But overall, when we get disappointed with our jobs, a lot of times it's because we're just tired of helping people who have self-imposed crises. But let me just tell you, that's life. Everybody on this side is going to have self-imposed crises sometimes. And that's why we went in the people business, because we wanted to be there and be a support to them. So number 6 is most people will disappoint you, make bad choices, help them anyway. Because at the end of the day and at the end of your life, you're going to be glad you did. Okay. Number 7, own your own mistakes. I love this because this is not the 2021 motto at all. 2021 motto is blame somebody. But the truth is, if you really want to do a great job in the people business or in any field you're in, you're going to own your own mistakes. I love what John Maxwell says. Some of y'all read his leadership books, and I love one of his quotes is, "You can't grow from the position of an excuse." Isn't that great? I go all over and speak to young people. I know, how could a fat 58-year-old be a teenager speaker? Don't ask me. I wear orthopedic shoes. I don't try to wear torn jeans to make them think I'm young. I'm trying to teach them how to be grown. I'm not trying to show them that I'm young. But one of the things I say to young people all the time, and this is a great quote, you can't grow from the position of an excuse. What do I mean about that in a practical way? What it means is, like, for instance, if I say the weight on my rear end is because my granny fried food, well, my granny's been dead for 20 years. So what I'm carrying on my rear end could not have been caused by that, right? what I'm carrying on my rear end is something I ate at the airport 2 weeks ago. And so I have to own that before I can get help. I can't walk forward, which I'm trying to do right now in my health, really trying to eat clean and walk several miles a day. But I can't walk forward and move forward in my life if I'm blaming somebody who's not responsible for my situation. You can't grow from the position of an excuse. So when you do something stupid at your work, be the first one to say, I did it, because everybody respects that person. If you kick the copier and now we're having to call Joe, the copy guy, at least say, man, I'm sorry. In a fit of rage, I kicked the copier and that was ridiculous and wrong, and I'm sorry. Own your own mistakes, because people respect that. And especially when you bring young people on your team, no offense to young people. My husband's a professor. I spend most of my time with people under 30. So this is no offense to them, but especially when you bring young people on, you need to make sure they understand this. If you violate policy, if you do something wrong, if you do something terrible, own it, come to us, tell the truth. And as we would say when we were disciplining our kids, it'll go better for you, right? That's true even as we grow up and into adulthood. Own your own mistakes. Number 8, listen to what people aren't saying aloud. This is a great skill, isn't it? It's difficult. Sometimes it's so difficult because we're so horrible and we're so quick to make a judgment, aren't we? That's me. I'm going to tell another bad story about myself. Some people, you might say, man, how do you become a national motivational speaker? How do you even do that? You go around willing to tell people terrible stories about yourself so that they feel better about themselves, and that's how. But I will tell a very terrible story about myself, but it does very much promote number 8, which is listen to what people are not saying. My husband, when our kids were little, we were out doing yard work out in the country. Now, when I do yard work, I'm 6 feet tall and I weigh about as much as a NFL, not an offensive lineman, but like kind of between offensive lineman and a defensive end, you know. And so I'm a big woman and I had on man clothes and my husband had on overalls, and our kids were dirty, filthy, because in the country we believe in letting kids get filthy. And we were out doing this yard work, and one of our dumb dogs, I don't know, some of y'all have Smartt dogs and others of you have dumb dogs. And we had, because we out in the country, we have a lot of dogs that are dropped. We had a dog that was just super sweet, really loved us, but very unintelligent dog. He was a big dog, I know. And he jumped up and broke my husband's arm. I mean, just like broke it. Philip yelled down from the shed. He said, Lisa, I think this dumb dog broke my arm. And I'm thinking, the dog didn't break your arm. Philip came up and I mean, that arm was just clearly broken. And so I gathered the dirty kids and I said, we've got to go to the hospital. We went to the hospital. And you know, when that real dirty family walks into the hospital and people think, and then the kids have snot in their nose, but they have leaves that have gotten on the snot. That was the situation in the hospital that day. And incidentally, that was my first exposure to the doctors coming to me in a quiet room and saying, what really happened to your husband's arm? And me being so coming from the sweetest family, I didn't even know. And I said, oh yeah, the big dog broke his arm. They're like, no, what really happened to your husband's arm? I didn't realize because I outweighed him by 50 pounds, they somehow thought that I had broken my husband's arm. And I'm like, I make love, not war. You know what I'm saying? But I didn't even know that. But anyway, we'd gone through that whole process. Our kids were laying on the floor, playing something, and everybody was kind of looking at us funny. On the way home, they had bandaged up Philip's arm, gotten him ready, but we had medication to get at the pharmacy. So we stopped by the pharmacy and I went in, and by this time these dirty kids are hungry. Y'all ever taken your dirty kids in the pharmacy and they're hungry? So they're like getting a bag of M&Ms and just inhaling it. They said, Mom, can we eat these? And I said, yes, I'll pay for them. You know, I go back to the pharmacy and I give them my prescription and my card so that we can get the medication. And this little cute little girl, weighs about 120, came back and said, Miss Smartt, I'm afraid you don't have Blue Cross Blue Shield pharmacy coverage. Now, I was already mad, right? I was mad because my dirty, hungry kids were driving me crazy. My husband's out in the car. And I said, no, we do. I said, run it again. Have y'all ever been that person like, oh, it was so bad? I said, run it again. We do have Blue Cross Blue Shield. And so she said, okay, Miss Smartt, because she's, you know, probably, if it had been a liquor store, she'd have probably hit that button back there, you know, when they have a bad customer, they want the police to come. But anyway, so she went back and she came back and she said, Miss Smartt, we ran your Blue Cross Blue Shield again, but you do not have this coverage. I'm so sorry. And by then, I was just done. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I think our kids were putting M&Ms up each other's nose by that point. And so I looked at her and I said, let me just tell you something. My husband works for the University of Tennessee at Martin. He's a college professor, and we do have Blue Cross Blue Shield, and he's out that car because our big dumb dog actually broke his arm. And because I'm a big woman, they thought I broke his arm, and these kids are dirty and hungry. And I'm telling you right now, we got to get that medication. And it was embarrassing. Have y'all ever been that person, the embarrassing, rude person? And she said, and I'll never forget it as long as I live, because had she pushed back, I felt like, because I outweighed her by 100 pounds, I felt like I could have taken her. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it was so bad. No. She looked at me and she said, oh, your husband broke his arm? I am so sorry. I am so sorry. And let me tell you, at the moment that she looked at this big angry woman who was being rude and horrible, and she heard what I wasn't saying. Because what I wasn't saying is, I'm stressed beyond belief. I don't know what I'm going to do. My husband is in terrible pain. We need to get this pain medication. And I thought I had this insurance, you know. And the minute it made me think about what the Bible says, a soft answer turns away wrath. Have you ever seen that work in real life, where somebody's full of wrath, but then a soft answer softens the wrath? And so I said, gosh, I'm sorry, you're right, you know. And she said, well, why don't you just pay cash? And she said, work it out with your insurance company, they'll reimburse you. And I said, okay. So we got the medicine and we got in the car, and I said, Philip, you will not believe it, because I said, we don't have Blue Cross Blue Shield. And he said, honey, we don't. We've got Cigna. And I'm like, yeah, hadn't you been getting the Cigna now? He said, the university said we're going to get on Cigna, and they've been sending you all that now. I said, I thought those were credit card offers. I've just been throwing them in the trash. So the next day, I took a shower. I got out of my man clothes, and I had to go back. And so I told her, I said, when she saw me coming in, she was probably like, I said, I want you to know, one, you were exactly right. We do not have Blue Cross Blue Shield. Evidently, we have Cigna. I was unaware. And I said, two, I want to say that you've changed my life, because the Bible says a soft answer turns away wrath. And when I came at you with wrath, you, younger than me, showed maturity when I was showing immaturity. And I want to thank you for that. And I went back and I apologized. I said, I'm very sorry. I was rude and horrible. Okay, so what is the point to that story? Sometimes, if you want to diffuse the situation, it's very important to listen to what they're not saying. When you're in a situation with somebody who's angry and you realize they have a family member who's dying, and that's really the problem. They're acting like they're unhappy about a bill or something like that, but that's not what they're unhappy about. So listen to what people aren't saying is number 8. Number 9, and this is only for you that are workaholics. If you're kind of lazy, which I'm sure is none of the attendees today, if you're kind of lazy, don't listen to this part. This is only for those of you that tend to take too much work home and you're very worky type A. Number 9 in working with people is do your very best, but don't lose your soul for someone who won't be at your funeral. Did you hear what I said number 9 is? It's do your very best, but don't lose your soul for someone who won't be at your funeral. What do I mean by that? I want you to do an exercise for a moment. This is very 2021. We're going to do an exercise. I typically am not, I'm like a 1908 motivational speaker, because I just tell the truth and say it bluntly sometimes. But this is a very 2021 thing. We're going to do a little exercise. I want you to think for a minute, if something happened today and you perished and you died, who's going to be on the front row of your funeral? It might be a parent, it might be your best friend, it might be a spouse, child. Think of the people who would be on the front row of your funeral. I want you to also realize that sometimes, and you'll know this, you actually, without meaning to, you jeopardize the people who are on the front row of your funeral in order to try to please somebody who's not even going to care that you died. Do I need to say it again? I think I need to say it again. Sometimes you're going to jeopardize the relationship you have with the people who are on the front row of your funeral to try to please somebody who's not even going to care that you died. This came to bear with me years ago when my kids were little, and I realized I could only speak so much every month. I would just cut nights off. I mean, and people would say, "Oh, you don't have anything on the 19th?" I said, "No, I'm eating pinto beans at the house with my kids on the 19th at that night." And they're like, "No, you can't come to California." No, I can't, because what somebody told me is, Lisa, you're jeopardizing your relationship with people who are on the front row of your life in order to please somebody that they're not even going to care if they find out you died on the way to the airport. And I thought, man, that's so true. Hear me say that doesn't mean don't work hard or don't do your work. But sometimes when you're doing extra, those of you that are real workaholic people, you're type A, you're doing extra, you have to stop and think, am I jeopardizing these people in order to please somebody who's not even going to care that I died? So principle number 9 in the people business, so that you don't burn out too. And what that means is, if you have a spouse or a friend or a child or anybody who's saying, you're working all the time, would you please not work all the time? That probably means you need to listen to that voice, whoever is saying that. So number 9, do your best. Do your very best. One time a young person came up afterwards and said, yeah, they want me to get there at 8:30 and I just cannot be there at 8:30. I said, no, that's not what number 9 means. If they tell you to get there at 8:30, you need to be there at 8:20. So number 9 just means all the extra stuff that's over and beyond, and it's jeopardizing people on the front row of your funeral. Do your best, but don't lose your soul for someone who won't be at your funeral. And incidentally, at the end of this little presentation, we're going to have a time for questions. So if you have questions and or confrontations, feel free to make them at the end. I'm an independent contractor, so if you're unhappy with this presentation, feel free to contact the people who hired me to do it. I know. Number 9 is do your best, but don't lose your soul for someone who won't be at your funeral. Number 10, we're going to go through these. We're going to get this. We're going to just go as quickly as we can, because I don't want to take up a lot of your time, and I want us to have time for questions. If there are any, if there aren't, that's fine too. In working with people, principle number 10 is confidence is like chocolate milk. The right amount is wonderful, but when you get too much, it'll make you sick. And I know that because when I was in 3rd grade, me being a big person and I loved chocolate milk so much, and the kids would figure that out. So if they didn't want their chocolate milk, they're like, hey, Lisa, do you want it? And then when we went to PE, boy, it all came back to bear. You know what I'm saying? Chocolate milk is a blessing if you have 1 carton, but if you have too much, it makes you sick. And again, and please, if you're young, don't hear me picking on you. Please do not hear that. The only reason sometimes I mention young people is I don't buy the 2021 idea that all ideas are equal. All ideas are not equal. When I speak to teenagers, I say, look, you're 16, I'm 58. If I do not know any more than you do, that means I just wasted 42 years of my life. So all ideas are not the same. And I loved what we used to do in this country, which is we assumed that young people needed apprenticing. They needed to learn. When we came onto a job, we knew, hey, whatever the supervisor tells us, we need to learn. And so when people come onto your team, this is a good thing to remind them of. Confidence is like chocolate milk. We want you to be confident, but we don't want you to be so overly confident that you overcompensate by saying that every idea you have is superior. I just said that. We don't want to overcompensate by saying that every idea I have is superior. And that's true of me even at 58. I get that there might be a 30-year-old who has a better idea than me. I understand that, especially if it comes to any kind of field that they're really an expert at. I want to tell you a little story. I love stories. I tell you why I love stories. All of life can be best illustrated by a story, right? Y'all have been to presentations before where they have a lot of just principles. And it really, a story, what it does, because we love story. That's why we go to the movies, y'all. That's why we read books, because our understanding is best crafted by story. So I'm gonna tell you a little story. I was on my way to Phoenix to do a speaking event, and my policy on the airplane is, if you don't want to visit, I'm not gonna bother you. So if you come sit next to me and you pull your book out, I'm not gonna bother you. I'm gonna love you and respect your space. But I would rather visit on the way to Phoenix because it'll make that flight go faster. So I got on my flight, and the guy, I had an empty space. I thought he's probably coming to this space. And this guy walked on the plane. I mean, like probably 30 something, super good looking. Have you ever seen a guy walk on the plane wearing a suit that costs more than your car? Have y'all ever been in that situation? And he's coming forward, and I think, oh, I think he's getting ready to sit here. And so when he sat down, he was friendly. He said, oh, hey. I said, hey. And so I thought he's going to want to visit on the way to Phoenix. So I said, oh, what are you going to Phoenix for? And he said, oh, I'm a lawyer. And let me tell you, he spent the next hours explaining in detail. He said, yeah, I'm with this law firm. We were just written up in the New Yorker. Do you read the New Yorker? I said, no, I read the Dollar General flyer in the paper to see if I can get mac and cheese on sale too for $1, because I don't like to pay 59 cents. And I thought he'd think that's funny, but he didn't even hear me. He was just going full bore. He said, yeah, our law firm was written up in the New Yorker, and I was in the Boston Marathon, and I got a little write-up. And he said, I was in the top 2,000, but he said, this year I'm going to be in the top 1,000 because I've really been practicing. And so he began the self-promotion campaign for the next 3 hours. Now, because I have people skills, I would ask him questions. Sure enough, I'd say, really, you were in the Boston Marathon. When did you start running? Where are you from originally? Oh, what about your mom and daddy? Where do they live? So I asked questions, and he monologued for a period of hours. Now, here's the point that I want to make about overconfidence. I tell young people, especially, I said, when you tell me how exceptional you are, it makes me really doubt it. You know what I'm saying? If you're busy verbalizing to me how exceptional you are, you're causing me to really doubt it. And I tell them, I said, it's like, have y'all ever seen them try to sell a hot tub online, and they keep saying, it's not greasy, it's not greasy, and then you realize it's a greasy hot tub being sold online? Because the more they tell you that this hot tub's not greasy, the more you think, oh, I bet that thing is greasy. The more you self-promote, the less likely I am to believe it. We've got to bring this back in 2021, because we've made a whole lifestyle of self-promotion, continual narcissism, and I'm on a war against it. I'm on an absolute war against it. I hope you'll join me on the war against narcissism, because it will kill our society and our culture. And so I wanted to say to this young lawyer, you know, look, I think you're a great guy, but you're going to have to learn how to be about other people and ask a question. He never even once said, why are you going to Phoenix? What are you doing? Who are you? You know, because the truth is, he didn't care about me. He cared about himself. But let me tell you something interesting that happened when he stood up at the end, and I said, hey, happy travels, you know. The guy who came walking onto the plane wearing the expensive suit and the big professional, I thought of him as being one person. But by the time he got up off the plane and started walking that direction, he, to me, looked like a little second grader whose suit was kind of hanging loosely off of him, and he was on the playground saying, my daddy can beat up your daddy. Self-promotion has to be handled very carefully. And so we have to be sure, especially with young people, because not because they're natural self-promoters, but because they've grown up in a culture that's self-promoting. So confidence is like chocolate milk. And another illustration and then I'll get right off of this subject. I'm going to tell one more illustration. I always say two people walk in a room. Every situation you're in, every day of your life, every room you walk in, you have one of two attitudes when you walk in the room. Let's say I'm at a conference and there's going to be a big group of people in here. We're just chattering, and I'm going to walk in the room. One perspective is, wow, I hope they're nice to me. I hope they like me. I hope I'm dressed appropriately. I hope they don't think that my funny stories are stupid. I hope that, you know, and what am I doing? I'm focusing on self. So I'm very aware of how you treat me, how you're going to take care of me. What are you going to say? How are you going to respond? The second person walks in and they're just thinking about other people. They're just thinking like, oh, how can I encourage somebody? How can I stimulate that person to love and good deeds? How can I ask a question, get to know that person? I may not know that. And you might say, well, that's an introvert extrovert thing. No, it's not. Because if you're an introvert, one of the best things you can do is realize you don't have to do all the talking. You can just throw out a question and other people start talking. People assume that at a social event, I'm real talky. They would probably be shocked. I'm not very talky. I ask a lot of questions. And so every day when we walk in a room, if we're the first person, we're always going to be disappointed because somebody's going to treat us not quite right. We're going to feel like we weren't dressed appropriately. Somebody's going to say something that slights us. We're not going to know how to do. But if we walk in and what we're thinking about is how to encourage, bless, and be a part of other people's lives, man, we're going to go to bed and we're going to sleep good because we've poured it out for others. My parents were teachers, and then after they retired, they moved to a lower middle class neighborhood and did tutoring for kids in the neighborhood. They were givers. Like until their 80s, they were just giving. And people might say, well, I bet they were tired of spending their whole life in service after teaching. No, they loved it. They slept good at night because their lives were about others and not about themselves. So number 10, confidence is like chocolate milk, just the right amount. Mom always said, stand up straight and know you're no better or no worse than anybody in that room, so that you can love and encourage them. Number 11 is a very terrible and hard principle that I hate to talk about, but I'm going to have to because it's the right thing to do. So I'm going to do it like a Band-Aid. You know how when you was little and your mama said, we're just going to rip it real fast, and you wanted to go, I'm going to rip this real fast. Principle number 11 is probably the most important principle when it comes to working with people, especially in a nonprofit agency or a government agency or any kind of business. This is literally the principle that could keep your business or your nonprofit from crumbling around itself with a cancer. And that principle is no gossip. What do I mean by that? What do I mean by no gossip? I literally mean that means no speaking about anybody unless you're planning their surprise birthday party. You should never speak about anybody unless they're in the room. No gossip. One time I was called in to do this big law firm because they had this gossip problem, and it was going to end up, hear me say, it was going to end up corroding the whole law firm, and it was all going to come chattering down because of this gossip. So I went in and did this meemaw talk. You know, I do meemaw presentations. Like, I love you, but I'm going to kick you in the butt at the same time because I want good for you. So I went in and I did this presentation, and afterwards, these two lawyers came up, click, 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 with those expensive shoes, you know what I'm saying? And I thought, ooh, they look like they're not happy with me right now. And they both said, we have a question about the gossip thing. We think we may have misunderstood what you were saying about gossip. And I'm thinking, wow, you know, y'all graduated from law school, and I, went to college for 6 years and didn't graduate. I can't imagine I shot that far over your head, but it's a possibility. And so I said, oh, okay, what did you not understand? And they said, well, we do this thing called venting, like where we vent with each other. I said, oh, let me give you an example. Like, you get an email from the top guy, and he says, we've got to start getting here at 7:30. And you're like, well, let me just tell you, I can't be. They said, right. Like, we vent with each other about how we don't want to get here at 7:30. I said, right, that's gossip. And they said, you're kidding. I said, no, if you want to talk ugly about the head guy, go down to the basement, get a pillow, scream your head off. But if another human being can hear what you're saying, that's gossip. And it will corrode the whole organization. Now, if something comes down from the top that you don't like, ask if you can have a 5-minute meeting, and then you can go in and say, this is why it's going to be hard for us to get here at 7:30. And then whatever he or she decides, that comes down. But at least you went to the source. Do you know what I'm saying? You went to the source. A lot of times, even in nonprofit agencies, there's a little bit of animosity between the people that are in the, as we would say in schools, front office, and the people who are on the ground. So when you get an email sometimes about something that you've got to change, or you've got to turn in this paperwork, Some people that are on the front lines will be like, let me just tell you something. I'm just busy squeezing people and hugging people, and I've lost that paperwork in the Impala, and I'm never going to find it. There's no way I can turn that in. And you just begin to vent about how the people at the front office, they don't know what they're talking about. They're not on the front lines of people business like what we are. And if you're tempted to do that, I want to encourage you, if there's a problem, go to the source. If you have a problem with your coworker, Sarah, you don't ever need to be talking in the bathroom. Or if you're having a problem with your coworker, Dan, you don't need to be talking at the water cooler about Dan. You need to be man or woman enough to go in Dan or Sarah's office and say, can I talk to you for 5 minutes? I feel like we're having a lot of conflict. We disagree about things and I want to work it out. And you might say, well, Miss Lisa, my problem with Dan is not a big enough deal to actually go in and confront him and talk to him about it. Then I would say, then that means you go option 2, which is to shut up and move on with your life. There's only 2 options when I have a problem with somebody. There's only 2 ethical options when I have a problem with somebody. Like if I feel like Teresa Sutphin or somebody with this organization didn't set this up the way they said, which incidentally, they've done fabulously with me because I'm a tech not person. They've done so fabulously. But if I thought something had been done wrong, I'd never say it to anybody else. I'd go right to Teresa and say, here's where it broke down. Maturity means I either go to the person, and if it's not a big enough deal to go to them, then I need to close my mouth and never speak of it again, go on with my life. In other words, if what Teresa did that I didn't like, if it was not a big deal, then I need to just close my mouth and go on with my life. Okay, so number 11 is no gossip. Number 12, forgive the ones who've wronged you, especially in work or nonprofit business. If somebody didn't get a promotion, if you didn't get a promotion because somebody said something wrong about you, or they lied about you, or they didn't tell the truth about you, somebody didn't fill out your paperwork in time, forgive the ones who've wronged you. Now, some of y'all have been wronged in such serious ways. I'm a survivor of sexual abuse. Some of y'all are. Some of you survived terrible family situations, all kinds of agony. And it's so stupid whenever we say forgive and forget, because there's some things that have been done to you that you will never forget. You're never going to forget. Now, if you step on my foot when you get in the elevator, I can forgive and forget, and I can say, oh, no problem, you know. But there's some things that have been done to me I'll never forget. Some things have been done to you that you'll never forget. And I've got a great quote for that. My mama was the wisest woman I'd ever known. She incidentally was a teacher and a social worker at 2 different times, but wisest person I ever knew, most giving, loving person I ever knew. And she had read somewhere this quote, and I cannot tell you how many times in our family we quoted this quote. And I always say, Mama's favorite quote: if you can't forgive and forget, in other words, if it's something so big, you're not going to forget it. If you can't forgive and forget, forgive every time you remember. Isn't that great? If you can't forgive and forget, forgive every time you remember. Because if not, as y'all have heard the illustration, it's like drinking poison and wondering why the other person doesn't die. You know, I'll tell you a professional situation. Well, it wasn't really a professional situation, but I was into it with this girl, and it was really bad, just so bad, just a real bad bunny, you know. And so I thought, I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm just going to go in, I'm just going to pour out every confession I can think of. I'm going to try to solve this relationship by just saying it was on me. You know, I'm just going to tell everything I could possibly ask forgiveness for. And I knew that then she would turn around and say, hey, Lisa, it wasn't just you. You know, she'd ask forgiveness for her part. We would be restored, and then all would be right. So I went into the meeting and I said, hey, I just want you to know this is what I did. I'm sorry. That was my attitude about it. I'm just sorry. Would you please forgive me for the breakdown in this relationship? I want you to forgive me, and I want our relationship to be restored. And she looked right at me, I mean, square in the eyes. And she said, I forgive you. And then I was sitting there, and I had hired a mediator. I brought a mediator in, and I was sitting there and I thought, well, the mediator and I are just waiting, you know, because I poured out everything I'd ever done since 2nd grade. And so we knew that she was going to say, well, of course, I had a part in the breakdown of this situation. And we just sat there. She never said another thing. So I had to apply this. She was never going to ask forgiveness. I was never going to forget the horrible things, incidentally, that she had done to me. But every time I remember, I forgive every time I remember, so that I'm not carrying the weight of unforgiveness. Okay, we're getting almost down to the end. We're going to go fast. 13, we only have 13 and 14, and then we'll be done. I got a few little stories to tell about that, and then we'll have time for question and answer if you have a question. If you don't, that's fine too. 13, and this is the mission for 2021, and that is stop whining. The way the people business is going to thrive and get even better is we're just not going to be able to complain about everything we want to complain about. When I went in for my colonoscopy 8 years ago when I turned 50, whenever they wheeled me in, they said, "How are you, Miss Smartt?" I said, "Oh, I'm great." And they said, "Well, I bet you're not great, because, you know, before a colonoscopy, they starve you to death, and then they send you in there, and, you know, everything's going to be, they're getting ready to knock you out." And I said, "Oh, no, I'm great. You know why?" And they said, "Why?" And I said, "Because I live in a country that has preventative medicine." Can you imagine? I live in a country that's so prosperous that we actually go in and do testing for something when I've had no symptoms to make sure that I'm well. And I understand what a blessing it is. So no, I'm not going to whine about a colonoscopy. Are you kidding? A colonoscopy is a sign of blessing and prosperity. So for 2021, our motto is no whining. Doesn't mean we don't ever have a problem with something. If something's a real big deal and we need to have a complaint, that's one thing. That's different from whining. I know in every business and nonprofit in America, there's one person who controls that organization. Do you know who that person is? The person who controls the organization is the person who controls the thermostat. Is that not true? In your organization, in your office, in your business, or in school, or wherever you work, it's not true. Is it not true that the person who controls the thermostat is the person who's in the power seat? Because the big middle-aged women are like, "You better get this thing turned down. I'm telling you right now, it's 110 in here, and I mean, you know, that they complain about the temperature. And then you got these little skinny 20-something like, "I'm just telling you, I'm freezing. I've got icicles hanging on my nose." And if you're the person who controls the thermostat, you have no idea what you should do. And you're like, "Oh my goodness, well, I'm going to solve it for you." This is a little freebie. This is a little freebie people business counsel for you. I'm going to solve it for you, because the truth is you always do what the big middle-aged people want you to do regarding the temperature. Because you need to ask yourself, do I want the middle-aged people to start removing items of clothing? Because I'm telling you right now, if that little gal right there can run on the sidewalk in a sports bra, I can sit at my desk in a sports bra. Do you want that to happen? And then you say, "Well, what am I going to do with the little young ones who are always freezing to death?" I have an answer for that too. You look right at that young person and you say, "You paid $100 for that North Face jacket. Put it on." See, answer solved. Woo, I'm giving y'all a lot of good counsel today, aside from the people business. No, what do I mean by that? So we can't whine about things like temperature. Good night. Move on with your life. We're not going to whine about a colonoscopy, temperature, administrators' decisions. If they make a really bad decision, we're going to set up a meeting. We're going to plead our case, and then whatever they decide, we're going to go with. We're not going to complain about the task we've been assigned, or something that I have to really watch is saying things like young people nowadays. That's so ridiculous. Some of the most exceptional people I know right now are young people, and some of the least exceptional people I know are people my age. So we don't want to complain about that. Number 14. Oh, and then we're going to wrap it up. I wanted to be less than an hour, because I think it's really boring when people talk longer than that. And so I'm going to try to go fast. Our last grab is principle 14, which is, when in doubt, be merciful. What do I mean by that? You know how sometimes you can't decide whether you should pull the hammer down in a situation, or whether you need to give them one more shot, and you can't decide. Now, there's times, like I said, where we have to lay the hammer down. I always say my mama, she had to fire people, because my mama was always the leader of every organization she was in, because she was a great leader. And I always say, if my mama has to fire you, then you really deserve to be fired, because she gave you chances. She tried to mentor you. She put her arm around you and said, "Hey, you need to be on time." She gave you chances. By the time she fires you, you're really fireable. And so what I mean by this is, in those situations where we can't decide whether we bring the hammer down or whether we give one more shot. In those situations, when in doubt, be merciful. You've heard me talk a lot about my problem with food. You don't realize how big a problem I'm talking about. Like, I really have been in therapies, Overeaters Anonymous. I mean, really problem with food. Maybe related to sexual abuse of my childhood. I don't know. There's all kinds of things, but I know that right now I just want to get healing where I am today. I can't go back and change the past. And so, because food is my problem, if you came to me and said, man, I'm having a problem with my weight, I'm just having a food problem, I'd be like hugging you and squeezing you and saying, girl, let me walk with you. I want to show you what group I'm in. I want to help you get help. I'm so merciful to somebody who has a food problem because I can relate to that. Now, let me tell you what sometimes happens, and I want to encourage you at the very end of this presentation about this. In areas where you are naturally an achiever, or you don't have a weakness in that area, and for me, because I tell you all of my weaknesses, but believe it or not, I actually do have a few strengths, as hard as that might be to believe. One strength that I have that I don't talk about a lot is I'm good with money. Philip and I both are just good with money. When we lived below the poverty level in a trailer park in Texas, when we were cash flowing his PhD at Texas A&M, I tell people, I said, we only had 79 cents, but we only spent 59 cents. So we were always 20 cents ahead. I'm telling you, in 33 years of marriage, we've never lost 5 minutes of sleep over money. I have a food problem. It's so funny. I wish I could use my discipline, my natural discipline with money, and apply it to the food issue. I tell people all the time, I don't want your big house, I don't want your boat, but I may want to eat off your plate. You know, all of us have areas where we struggle with discipline, and then we have areas where we just got to pass. I mean, that's just easy for us. Now, here's my last admonition to you. In the areas where you struggle, you're always going to have compassion and mercy because you know what it is to walk that path. But you've got to learn to have mercy in areas where you're naturally strong. And I'll give you my last story. And that's about a little young married couple getting ready to get married. And we love to do premarital counseling. Philip and I, that's one of our joys, is to help people, because guess what? People don't automatically know how to be married. You have to actually teach them the concepts of how to treat each other with love and respect. And so we love to do premarital. And the next week we were going to do finances, and we were so excited because we love to talk to people about their finances. Because if you're below the poverty level, we can help you. We have 100% been there. If you curse the IRS, we can help you with that because we've been in both of those situations. And so we were all excited about it. And this little young gal came up to me and she has had her eyes filled with tears, and she's like, oh, Miss Lena, I'm next week. I've got to talk to you right now. So we went into a little classroom and I said, what? And she said, oh, Miss Lisa. She weighed like 95 pounds and she'd already cried out about 90 pounds of it. And she said, we are getting ready to get married in 3 months. She said, he knows about my student loan debt, but he does not know that I have over $17,000 of consumer credit card debt. And she said, I haven't wanted to talk to him about it. And let me tell you, when she said that, there was an ugly part of me. You know what I'm saying? I wanted to say, if you don't have the money, don't buy it. You know, I just wanted to shake the little thing because I thought, 17,000 of consumer credit. I mean, we lived below the poverty level, raised 2 kids, and didn't have any. I mean, I just like, there's a part of me that I'm just like feeling that feeling. I'm not doing that expression. I'm being sweet, you know, but I'm thinking, man, I'm just getting ready to want to shake into this girl. And about the time that I was just being sweet and listening and thinking, what am I going to say to this girl? I could hear it's like a whole choir of angels saying in the background, Lisa, if you're not hungry, don't eat it. You know what I'm saying? I began to realize that everybody's struggle is the same struggle. It just comes in different forms. I don't like to overspend. I'm good with money, very disciplined when it comes to finances. But I'm very undisciplined when it comes to food. So when she began to share that, I wrapped my arms around her and I realized I can so relate to what she's saying. I can love her. I can encourage her. I said, I'm not going to tell you that this isn't good. I'm not going to say, you know, hey, that's good, it's terrible, but I'm going to help you get out of it. I'm going to wrap my arms around you. I said, I understand what this is like. And she said, Miss Lisa, you're in debt. I said, no, I wear my debt on my rear end. When in doubt, be merciful. And that goes to our very, very last phrase. It's one of my favorite quotes. I share it everywhere I go. It's anonymous. Somebody quoted that it was somebody, but they were wrong about who said it. And I'll say it twice, and then we will go to whoever's going to go next. And that quote is this: be kinder than necessary, for everyone you meet is fighting some kind of battle. Be kinder than necessary, for everyone you meet is fighting some kind of battle. Thank you very much. Enjoy your bienies. I wish I could throw them through the thing. Don't worry, Philip, I'm not going to, because the University of Tennessee would want to kill me.
Thank you, Lisa. That was wonderful. I really enjoyed your presentation, and I know that everyone else listening did too. And I'm wondering if we have any questions.
No, we do not.
You answered all the questions, Lisa.
Great
But
job.
you were
Thank you.
fabulous, and thank you so much for motivating us and giving us some really good tips on how to be a better people person in working with individuals that we work with every day. So we appreciate you and hope you have a great rest of the day, and hope we run into you soon in person.
Yes, in person. Yes, thank y'all. Have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you. And I just want to remind everybody that our last virtual education series will be August the 24th. And we are going to be having a speaker talk about planning and preparing for aging, wills, powers of attorney, and advanced directives. So we look forward to seeing everyone again August the 24th. Thank you again, Lisa, and I hope everyone has a great day. And thank you to Visiting Angels for being our sponsor. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye. Hey, thank you, Phil, for being my tech guy. My guy.
Your guy.
You're a good guy. Thank you. You're a cute guy. Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right. Stephen got a clean bill of health.
Oh, good.
So he's cleared to.
How are you?
I'm good.
You feeling a little better?
Better.
Well, we definitely